Hey guys, it's your girl Leslie, and welcome to my channel. So hey guys, it hasn't actually been a little bit. I recently posted a video about what's going on with Scott Coffin and all of that, because I feel like you guys deserve to know if you don't have TikTok or really anywhere to look for it. Anywho, chapter 8, Past Midnight. Cletus stared up at the ceiling, the silence of the house boring him to death. Juan had gone to bed, leaving him alone in the living room. Of course, outside he could hear all kinds of action that got him wishing to be anywhere in the city but trapped in the house. He suddenly forgot why he had wanted to stay in the first place. There was a window in the living room. He could just slip out into the night and burn off all his excess energy. Perhaps catch someone off guard and have a meal he so desperately desired. All that and still be back before Wyan woke. Red perked at the idea, humming inside his mind. Red and black strands of the Simonite trailed along his body, and her head formed out of his chest. White eyes staring at him with an intense stare. Yes, Cletus, let's go outside. I am also very hungry, she whined, her head bumping under his chin desperately. We can't leave her here unprotected, he argued, his Simonite letting out an annoyed whine before nipping at his skin with sharp teeth. She wasn't being overly harsh with the biting, but he still got a couple jolts that felt like the sting of a bee. Red, cut it out! He shooed her away with a couple of swishes of his hand. Wine is more important than a snack, he argued. Red pouted, laying against his chest and letting out small sad mewls that reminded him of a kitten begging its mother for milk. He ignored her, focusing on the other sounds that were around him. The gentle ticking of the clock, the sounds of New York's never-quiet streets, his own soft breathing. Everything still seemed too quiet. Everything except his Simonite. But he couldn't block out his other noises, so he stretched at Red's visible body, knowing she would end up falling asleep if he kept it up. He was never someone who loved the quiet, but he felt good knowing that the quiet meant that Wyan was safe and still fast asleep in her room. He found himself blushing softly at the thought of her and just how peaceful she looked while she was asleep. He had got lost in the memory of when he snuck in the night. He scoffed softly at himself, focusing in on his Simonite for a moment. She was now purring, enraptured by the soothing strokes of Cletus's fingers against her silky, liquid surface. He paused as he heard footsteps. He almost immediately jumped up defensively, but reasoning took over and he sat up silently and slowly. Red, eyes still closed from having been so close to sleep, still cradled in one of his arms, he peered down the hall, seeing Wyan had entered the kitchen. Oh, it's you. You're lucky. I almost attacked you, he replied, his spare hand going back to tending to Red. Her purrs were loud enough for Wyan just to hear them after she poured herself a cup of water. Yeah, thanks for not damaging me further, she replied, taking a few sips of her water before putting the cup down on the kitchen island she leaned onto. You're not going to try to sleep tonight? I doubt someone's going to sneak in while you sleep. Oh, I can be fully alert while I sleep, he assured her before looking down on the Simonite, fast asleep while laying on his arm. It's just Red. She doesn't like to stay still for long. She often has a lot of energy. Falling asleep is difficult with her, he explained. Wyan chuckled softly, the sound pleasing to Cletus. Seems like you have it under control, however, she said with a smile, pointing down at the Simonite he held onto. I suppose now she's kind of cute, she admitted. Yeah, suppose she is, he replied before looking up at the clock, then at Wyan. It's past midnight. What's your excuse for being up right now, babe? He asked her. watching her stare into her glass for a long moment at his question. It's just, I've heard so many tales and stories of what Loki can do to somebody, she whispered. Cletus deciding the topic was important enough that he should join her in the kitchen. He stood up slowly and walked over to stand across from her on the other end of the kitchen island. Are you afraid he's going to get to you? Because he won't. I know. You told me all this, that you'll protect me and whatnot, but what if something goes wrong and you die? Then what? Then I die? She asked. Cletus feeling very tempted to hold her hand as he saw it clenched on the countertop. Then you'll be left alone. Once I die, he won't have a reason to hurt you, he whispered back, moving around the island to be by her side. Her brown hair fell into her face as she looked down, so Cletus reached forward and softly brushed the strands away. No offense, but I doubt you die for me, she whispered, her heart skipping a beat as he touched her. This time, it wasn't from fear, but something else stirring down deep inside of her. Before you came around, there wasn't really anything to live for. I mean, it was just me and Red without a true goal ever in mind. Then I decided I could make you into something I could live for, he whispered, a hand reaching down to the cross hanging still in the air from around her neck. He looked at it for a long moment. So, now that I've found something to live for, I don't want it to go away. I don't necessarily understand it or understand anything really, but I do know that I don't want to live the rest of my life never feeling whatever feeling it is that's inside me right now. If it means losing my life too to keep it, then so be it. Wyan stared up at him in shock for a long, confused moment. He caught her gaze and dropped the cross, letting it swing back and forth on the small silver chain. He took in a deep breath and looked off to the side. Red had one eye peeked open, watching the interaction between her host and Wyan. She could sense the change of chemicals in his brain, but she didn't point it out. She didn't want to interrupt the moment they were sharing. She didn't reply, but she shifted closer to him until their sides met. Cletus seeming to automatically lean into her, they basked in the silence together, just enjoying the company of each other's presence. Wyan took another sip of her water, and she decided maybe having someone else in the house wasn't really that bad. They spent 10 minutes just relaxing with each other. They stayed like that until Wyan found herself growing tired, and for the first time while being close to Cletus and his symbionte, she felt safe, relaxed, and just calm. I need to go back to bed, Cletus, she told him. Cletus just whispering a small, yeah, in response. As she pulled away from him, she stood up straight. Good night, Cletus. Good night, Wyan, he replied, staring down at nothing as he zoned out into his own thoughts. He heard the bedroom door close, and he sighed. Why do I care so much? He asked himself, Red shifting slightly from where she laid on his arm. She quickly scanned through his thoughts for an answer. You think you need her. Something about her makes you feel wanted. Feel as though you have a place you belong, she replied with a soft purr at the end of her sentence. A place where we both belong, she corrected herself. Cletus gave a small chuckle and walked back over to the couch. As he laid himself out on the cushions, Red readjusted herself and nudged at Cletus's hand until it was moving across her skin once more in a slow rhythm. You're right. I do feel like I have a purpose, he whispered, and that feeling is pretty damn amazing to have. Alright, y'all, so we is in chapter 9. Let's get into it. It's chapter 9, Hide and Seek. The next morning was rather calming. Ryan had woken up to Cletus having fallen asleep on the couch, but the second she entered the other room, he was wide awake once more. "Good morning, sweetheart," he said with a yawn, stretching his arms with a satisfying crack. Ooh, that would sound so good. I love that. "Good morning, Cassidy. You look like you finally got some sleep," she pointed out, noticing his hair was messier than it usually was. He ran his fingers upon it processing. She was staring at the red locks that fell into his face. "Yeah, some sleep," he replied, moving to the over what? Moving to walk over to her side. He watched her as she started making something to eat for breakfast. She just grabbed some tater tots from the fridge, and Cletus, had felt Red burst awake at the sound of the opening bag. "Can you make some for Red? She loves those things," he tells her with a small smile. She nodded, pouring a fairly large amount of extra Pop-Tarts into the pan for the Symphonite, who in return gleefully manifested to her own head to watch the food as it was shoved into the oven. "Did you sleep at all?" Cletus asked, Wen, who simply shrugged in response. "Yeah, a little bit," she told him, setting a timer, then turning back to where Cletus stood with Red hovering beside him. "I mean, I have slept better in the past before, but given the threat on my life, I would say I slept well," she finished with a small sigh. I don't know how to say that word. Whatever. With a sigh, fidgeting with the cross that hung down around her neck. Cletus eyed her for a moment before looking back at the television. He'd best be keeping an eye on the news in case Loki's escape was ever brought up at some point. He quickly found the remote and flickered the TV to life, letting it sit on the news program. If Loki's name was mentioned, he would automatically start paying attention. "Are you scared of what Loki can do?" Wyan asked him. Red let out a small scoff at the question. The Symphonite knew his mind was far too well, and knew exactly what Cletus was going to say in response. "I'm not afraid of anything," he quickly replied, walking back to her side. "Loki should be afraid of what I can do, actually," he added with a small smirk. Wyan looked away, and he felt as though he said something wrong to her somehow. "You are really afraid, aren't you?" "Hey, like I said, he has to get through me first, so if I wind up dead, you're safe." "Cletus, you idiot," she muttered, her voice bordering on a growl. He hasn't had her insult him before. Red chuckled from where she floated at his side. He knew that chuckle. She usually used it when she was upset and about to scold him for something. He learned it to count it as a very threatening sound. Was he about to get scolded? And what for? Not everything is about me, you know. Oh my god, I can't go loud. I'm sorry, y'all. So just pretend I'm yelling, just not at you, just to make it authentic. I'm sorry. Not everything is about me, you know. Can't you tell that your death isn't what I want either? Really, I don't want anyone to die. So could you stop talking like a suicidal fool? Do you know what grief is? Probably not. I grieve for everyone in my life, Cletus. I've seen enough death. Don't try to die for me. It'll only hurt me more in the end. Her words made him freeze in place, and Red had ducked behind his shoulder as though she was frightened as well. Wyan turned around just in time to hide the stray tears that leaked from her eyes. She was frustrated more than sad. When he regained himself, he softly whispered to her, "You would grieve for me?" "Shut up," she replied. "No, Wyan, No, seriously, shut up." She interrupted to push past him and walk towards the TV. As he followed her gaze, he heard the words that were being said on the news program. In short, well, from the way Wyan started talking in the panicked breaths, it was obvious. Loki had already slithered his way out of prison like the crooked snake he was. He was, yeah. "Oh God," Wyan whispered as she backed away from the screen. Is he already free? How could he could be on his way right now. What are we supposed to actually do? Do we wait for him to come afterwards? Do we run? We calm down is what we do. Wan, slow your breathing. You're shaking, he told her, walking closer to her side. She pretty much fell into his arms as he made it to her side. Oh, all right, you can do that too, he whispered, holding her fast against himself. She was silent in his arms, other than her rushed breathing that was beginning to slow down to match his. They were interrupted as the tater tots alarm went off. They were both silent for a few moments. Wan looked up towards Cletus, who just looked annoyed by the interruption. Red, on the other hand, looked between the two. Would tater tots make anyone here happy? She asked, Wan moving away from where she'd pressed against his chest. Not personally, but I guess I should eat, she whispered in response. Cletus let the Simonite go crazy on the tater tots, letting her swallow a couple and tear apart the others while he focused on the situation at hand. If we wait for them here, we have the advantage of knowing they're coming. If we run, we can only hide for so long. And I don't like holding. Cletus spoke, Wan looking up at him and narrowing her eyes. Them? She questioned, unsure if she had actually heard this correctly. Loki will send henchmen first. He doesn't like to get those snow-white hands of his dirty, he explained. Wan looked off to the side at that, unsure if she wanted to count that as good news or not. Henchmen are never stronger than the boss, right? There was only a few minutes of silence when something set both Cletus and Red off. They didn't know what it was they felt, but both Simonite and host were alert to it. The Simonite silently seeped back into Cletus' skin, and it began circling her host protective, ready to spring forth at any moment. Cletus? She whispered. The sudden change was very noticeable. Her words went unanswered, other than the primal snarl that escaped Cletus as the Simonite took control, spreading across his skin and becoming carnage only a second later. She couldn't help but flinch at the snarl, but she grew scared as when carnage grabbed her. It was a blur and honestly a lot to process. Suddenly, Carnage dragged her out of the window with them. She held onto the Simonite and let out a small scream as she was suddenly flying above the city. Why in the house? Carnage didn't get a second to finish when a loud explosive rumble cut them off, sending a wave of wind that knocked Carnage against the wall of another building harder than they originally planned. It took Carnage an extra moment to catch themselves on the wall, arm tightening around Ryan to make sure she was still safely tucked in their arms. When she was able to focus again, she looked upwards to her apartment. What used to be her apartment now. Fire had taken over the floor she had been on, along with the bits of room below it. My house, was all she could whisper at the sight of it. Carnage was moving up now, swiftly getting them to the top of the tower. They had gave a final jump and made it to the roof, which had gravel laid all on top of it. They settled Ryan down, but didn't let go of her. With an agitated sound, the Simonite shot out a thick webbing and grabbed onto something in the air. The white rope was giving a rough tug, and the object Carnage had grabbed flew right into their claws. She watched as he crushed a drone with large and red talons, the same talons that held onto her so gently. He's been watching us. We have to get moving. Find somewhere less open. Somewhere where you can stay away from a battle. We're too vulnerable up here. They growled, sweeping her back up into his arms. She was silent, scared, unsure of what she was supposed to do or say. So she stayed in their arms without a sound or movement. The whole thing made her head spin. Everything she owned in that house was gone. Everything. Carnage couldn't care less about the destroyed building. They had their minds set on swinging them down towards the dock ward, not far away. She could hear a clicking-like sound coming from the Simonite's cracked mouth, the expression on their face making her process the noises as annoyed, tisking sounds. How good are you at hide and seek? They asked, scanning the crates and boxes below. Wan looked down at them as well. They were huge crates, probably as tall as her, if not taller. She stared until Carnage's webbing disappeared and they began hurtling down towards the crates. She hid her face in their chest, but to her surprise, they landed on top of the boxes with no damage. In fact, it was the crate that cracked under the Simonite's taloned feet. Carnage let go of her, then jumped on top of another box that was stacked at a higher level, dropping down on all fours and letting out a primitive snarl. They scanned the area quickly before turning back to her. They eyed her with a inquisitive stare for a few seconds to try and think of some sort of plan. Their attention was drawn away by the electric buzz of drone propellers. It was speeding above them, scanning the area. With quick speed, Carnage took down the drones with a quick shot of webbing. It fell off to the side and out of their view. Loki apparently gave 2 days for you to decide to leave me alone or not. Believe me or not. But now that means you're a part of this, which isn't fair. Their gaze softened on her from the place they were perched up on the crate. They wanted to say more, but a strange stench filled their senses. Something's coming. You have to hide. They looked around and growled in frustration. They then looked down at the crate below their feet. After a brief moment, Carnage jumped back down. She watched as they used their tendrils to pry the crate they had previously been standing on open. Paper seemed to instantly fall out, and Carnage wasted no time using tendrils to push the rest out of the box. Get in. I need to keep you out of sight, they ordered, Ryan looking between them and the box. I'll stay close. I just want you to be plain out of sight. With that, the Simonite gave her an extra nudge forward. She pretty much stumbled into the box. Carnage paused as they watched her look towards them with a deep fear in her eyes. Carnage, please, be careful. I won't die, they said, before pushing the wooden sheet they had ripped off back against the crate. They didn't lock it in place, just laid it there to blend in with the rest of the crates. The papers had been mostly blown away by the winds. Ryan could hear Carnage rushing past her hiding spot, their talons giving away their position as they scraped against the wood boxes. She followed the sound across the other side of the box, finding a hole she could peek out of. She saw Carnage land within a clearing, a demonic screech leaving their gaping paws as another man seemed to almost soar down onto a box in front of them. Masked and armored figures climbed up and around the clearing Carnage had entered, aiming the strange weapons at the Simonite. The man she recognized as Loki wore quite the armor and cape. His gold helmet was dressed with curved horns, and his cape was the same green he seemed to favor with all his other outfits. He smiled at Carnage despite the hostility they had obviously shared with each other. Carnage, how good to see you. Where's the woman? He asked, but he relaxed as if he were greeting an old friend. Wow, he probably has none. No offense, bro. She saw Carnage shake their head and spit the answer out hatefully. As if I would ever tell you. She's safe. They looked around at the other men. One that trailed too close as the Simonite was struck with a serrated tentacle being thrown back into the crate beside hers. She heard them hit the ground simply, causing laughter from the Simonite. Your guns are useless, Carnage scoffed, dropping down into the crouch that reminded her of a cat ready to tackle its prey. And in their eyes, Loki was the prey. Oh yes, the weapons may not work, but let's try something else. Let's try something here. And with that, Loki nodded to a man who fired a bundle of metal chains from the gun that wrapped around Carnage. Ryan wasn't surprised when it was thrown off immediately after. The Simonite just laughed as if it were a joke. But when several more were fired at once, it took Carnage some time to process the shots. This time, before they had the chance to get rid of themselves of the metal knitting, the metal started to glow. Then suddenly, they burst with a green fire that rushed over the metal completely. Carnage let out a screech of pain as the fire spread around him. No! She heard them Cena to almost squeal. Fire! It hurts! Guys, if you guys don't remember, Simonites hate fire, and that's kind of their weakness. Just letting y'all know if y'all forgot. Continuing. Wine raised a hand to her mouth, eyes wide as she watched the scene unfold in front of her. Red peeled away from Cletus, seeping out on almost every part below his skin to avoid the hot touch of the flames. From what she had heard, Simonites did not fare well against flames. Loki watched with the same smile as before, unfazed by seeing Cletus in so much pain. Wine, on the other hand, had no idea what to do. That was until she heard Loki's next words. Search the docks. Not even this monster deserves to die alone. Find his partner. No, leave her. You have me. Leave Wine alone. Cletus yelled from within the flaming imprisonment. Sections of the man's skin began to burn and blister from the flames. Turn the fire off. The Sibonite has withdrawn, Loki ordered, and slowly the flames ceased. Red did not dare cover Elitis again in fear that what would be done to her, and the hurt she was already feeling. Wine pushed down the wooden sheet that Carnage covered her crate aside and made a run for it, ignoring the sounds her feet made as she raced away from the scene. She heard a loud shout from behind her. "Hey, over there!" a voice called, alerting her that she has been spotted. She didn't slow down, not for a second. She kept pressing on as fast as she could, but it didn't matter. She wasn't faster than these men. The same netting that was shot at Cletus came racing towards her. But before the net could hit her, something else happened. I'm sorry, I'll have to leave y'all on a cliffhanger. I'm sorry, y'all. Don't worry, I have to leave y'all on a cliffhanger because it's like 2 a.m. for me, and I'm supposed to be asleep, but I'm not. But yeah, I mean, I'm sorry for leaving you on a cliffhanger, but don't worry. Y'all will be able to forgive me later, I promise. I'm so sorry, y'all. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed. Like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more amazing videos. Please don't hate me for leaving you on a cliffhanger. This is probably like one of the first cliffhangers I ever left you on. Don't be too many crybabies about it. I will put a link to the story if you really want to get ahead of me. But just to let you know, I read the story fully. Ha ha ha. I'm just kidding. I'm not. Just kidding. No, we don't need to be mean to each other. But yeah, guys, very interesting. Recently, I'm pretty sure this is complete random, but Loki has a series of some sort. I'm not sure, and there's a lot of good hints about it. I think it's on Netflix and on Hulu. And it has Loki, and basically about he's basically captured and yada yada, and it's really complicated. It really is. But there's a lot, people are looking at it and they're seeing a lot of Easter eggs and slash they're making a lot of theories about it and a lot more things I would like to get into detail, but I haven't watched it, so I can't really say for sure. But yeah, just a random thing. And also, isn't there like a new Carnage movie coming out really soon, or it already has came out? And I hope I'll be able to watch it as soon as possible. But of course, I had to watch my Cruella de Vil. I absolutely loved Cruella de Vil. Point and, well, period. But yeah, guys, other than that, I gotta go for now and go to sleep. I promise I will not certainly edit this right after I stop recording. I absolutely promise. It's like, okay, bye and peace.